actually in the centre of the castle at the moment, which very sadly about 400 years ago there was a sale basically for all the stone, and so people came, took whatever they want, and now it's been left as it is, which is quite sad. As you can see here, got some interesting groundwork. There's one of the other towers there. It's quite a big castle as well, as you can see here, all the way around. There's Robert Tye, and I was actually going to do the interview or conduct the interview in that tower there, but it's been such a gloriously beautiful day. We've been so lucky with the weather, although it is very hot. It's about 90 degrees, but I like it. So yeah, so we've also been able to take in this wonderful historical site as well. It's been a real bonus. So thank you, Mr. Tye. So hello, as you can see, I'm with Robert Tye, who has a YouTube channel called The History of Troy Weight, and who back in 2009 produced this marvellous book, Early World Coins and Early Weight Standards. It's some very, very important work, so I've got a few questions for him today. It's, as you can see, we're at Hadleigh Castle, which was built in 1215 at the time of Henry III, I believe, or Henry II, one of the two. Edward III stayed here. He used this as one of his private residences, and as you can see now, it's in a state of ruin really, which is very sad, but we've got beautiful weather for this interview, so I'll crack on. So, Robert, let's get comfortable first of all. Right, so how did you get into this topic, Robert, and why is it important that we understand its history?
The history of Troy weights. Well, how I got into it is pretty complicated. I started collecting fossils when I was about 5. I started collecting bun pennies out of change when I was about 8. That'd be about 1960. I moved on from there. I mean, when I was kind of a teenager, you get into beer and girls, forget that kind of thing. But I got into philosophy, and I was very disappointed with what I was taught. In fact, extremely angry about what I was taught in philosophy. So at that stage, I went back to coins again, with the idea that coins always tell you the truth. You've got a 2,000-year-old coin. It doesn't tell you a great deal, but it definitely tells you something that has to be true.
Yes.
And that's not really true of history books. So I kind of started over with history about 1975, checking it against coins to see what really happened. Okay.
Yeah.
And that led me into gold, silver and copper, and why the different denominations worked against each other, and I do mean against. But from that, round about 2000, I realised that there was a history of weight connected to that, which had been erased. Since the 1960s, it had kind of been rubbed out of the story of history. It had been really big until about 1960. And when I got into it about 2000, everybody had lost track. So since 2000, I've been working mostly on weight in general, which is Troy weight in particular. Okay?
Yeah.
I think that's enough for a starter.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, thanks. In 2001, you published a pamphlet entitled, I think it's called Giges.
Well, I say Guy Gaze, but
Giges, we'll call it Guy Jay's Magic Ring. The subtitle is The Origins of Coinages and Open Societies. So what is your view, Robert, of the role of the invention of coins in the development of open societies, and how did coins impact the issue of measures?
Right. There's a really major correction here, and you're saying what everybody says. Nearly everybody says coins were invented. Coins can't have been invented. They're too simple an idea, right?
Okay.
I mean, all you're doing is you're taking a piece of metal, You're putting a stamp on it to guarantee the weight and the purity. Now, people were doing that with bricks in 2000 BC. They made a standard sized piece of clay and they stamped the king's name on it and they carried on.
Right.
And that's all they're doing with coins. So it's wrong to say they were invented, in my view. In my view, what happened is people were allowed to have them.
Right.
Before 600 BC, precious metals belonged to a small elite and they were allowed to have them. And everybody else was more or less a serf. Right? And there's a huge change. When coins come in, the economy is run by ordinary people buying and selling things. Before that, the economy was run by people being told what to do. Okay? And the rest of coinage is really that story. I mean, we keep shunting back to gold and it being run by the ultra rich, and then you get copper again. It goes backwards and forwards. But the main thing about coins in open societies is open societies have got to have them. They've got to have markets, and markets are the places where books were first sold. So if people are going to read books for themselves rather than sit in front of a pulpit,
Yeah.
you need coins. So they're absolutely fundamental to an open society, and what we might get onto later on is that really since 1930 people like Keynes and Rockefeller have been trying to get rid of coins.
Very true.
It's
Yeah.
going all the time.
Yeah.
And they're trying to push us back to before 600 BC to kind of ultra-communist society where everybody's told what to do. Okay.
Yeah.
That's enough on coins because it gets complicated after that.
Okay.
But that's your basics.
It's a brilliant answer, fascinating. Okay. So in your coin catalogue, which I've got here with me, early world coins and early weight standards, as you can see, there's so many coins here that are catalogued in this book. It's fascinating stuff. So in this catalogue, you write, Robert, many professional scholars have tended to be sceptical about what can be achieved by way of metrological explanation. I hope this study will assist in returning the matter to the prominence it deserves. What do you judge the modern state of metrology to be?
Right, okay. I'm going to start this with Keynes again, because what he did, he raised a plot really between 1924 and 1930. Up to 1924, he was kind of trying to tell the truth, and by 1930 he decided to forget about telling the truth, really. So on coins, he said the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians got on perfectly well without them. Right? He thought they were, because they're really pretty Greek coins, he thought they were just people showing off, the Greeks, just propaganda for the city. So he completely scrubbed what I'd earlier said, which is the vital thing, and he said they're unnecessary, and that's where the plan from the highest level starts to go to get rid of coins, which we're seeing all around us.
Yeah.
But he said two other things. He was saying that in connection with getting rid of the gold standard. Now the gold standard was in a mess. Britain was in a mess. That's why he got such a good reception. But he called the gold standard a barbarous relic. Okay. But also, up to 1924, he himself had been immersed in studying metrology. In fact, he says he missed meetings at the Treasury because he'd been up all night calculating weight standards. So he's doing exactly what I'm talking about. And then in 1926, he told his wife that all this stuff had been Babylonian madness, right? And he invented a completely false story about metrology. It was a ludicrous story about the king weighing himself, really saying that the state invented weight standards in a completely arbitrary way. They didn't really have a history, and he's implying we can just forget about it. And that's so we can forget about the Troy standard and which is the gold weight standard, because he wants to get rid of the whole shoot. He wants to rewrite history and get rid of all those three things. Okay. And I think at this stage, you ask me what I judge the modern state of metrology is. And what I'm going to tell you is where we ought to be if we'd carried on from 1960. So Keynes kicks in 30. The first generation, his own contemporaries, don't believe him. They know it's nonsense. But as always, the schools kick in. The second and third generation believe it. They taught it as kids.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's where we went wrong.
Okay.
So I'm now going to tell you where I think we should be, which mostly is from old guys in the 1960s who are dying off then. So I'm going to talk about Troy standard. That's the very first, in my opinion, the very oldest. And it starts simply like that. If you hold your hands up and make a cup out of them, and then you scoop up wheat grain in a heap, that is going to weigh about 250 grams. In fact, with my hands, it's almost exactly 250 grams. Now, if you do that twice, you'll have what the Babylonians called a minor, which means a count. And two of those heaps is about 500 grams, and it's a man-day bread ration. So that is absolutely fundamental. And we start to get weights and records between 3,000. Whoops. I've gone back to the cupped hands, and this was the measure which probably started up at the time people first started to communally grow wheat. So at the very start of the Neolithic, maybe 10,000 years ago. So we've probably been using a 500 gram standard for maybe 10,000 years, that's my opinion. But we don't get weights for trade till till about properly 3000 BC. And by 2000 BC, the state in Mesopotamia has stepped in and standardized it and made pretty exact rates. And the pound is about 500 grams, as I said, and it's split into 60 shekels, but it basically is probably still remembering the 360-day year, and that's the 60 is just part of the count up to 360 to have a full year of 1 man year food supply. But from then forward, you're measuring precious metals that way in shekels. Now, from there, this is not used in the Mediterranean. From about 2000 BC onwards, they use the Babylonian 500 grams, but they split it in a binary way, half quarter down to the 16th, which is the ounce. So this is after 2000 BC, in around Crete and into Mycenae, we actually start to use what today is called Troy apothecaries, which is 500 grams split half, 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 all the way now down to 3.9 grams through the Troy ounce. And that may have spread to England before 1200 BC. Now, the earliest weight known was only discovered in about 2007, and it was discovered in the sea off Salcombe, and it's slightly water-worn, and it weighs about 29.5 grams. So a troy ounce is 31 grams, and it's a pretty good fit. So we can't say for certain, but it looks as though a version of Troy crossed into Europe around 2000 BC and had arrived in England by 1200 BC. Now, we don't know very much more for quite a long time then. The Romans are using a standard which is related to Troy, but to find out about that, you'd have to look at my own videos because it gets a bit complicated. Yeah. And the version of Troy we actually use today came into being after 789 AD. And it's a much more precise version of Troy. What happened is in 789, Charlemagne announced what he called a general admonition. It's a very long document with rules for the whole society, the church and all society. But what he's doing in it is he wants to produce what is literally a medieval euro. He wants a pan-European penny, and he wants to push everybody onto his penny. Now, the one person who wouldn't do this was Offa. And we know this because of a letter from Alcuin. And Alcuin's clearly a kind of Remainer, and Offa's a kind of Brexiteer. And Alcuin is in the pay of Charlemagne, and he says that Offa is being misled by the devil. And there's a complete shutdown of trade. There's a hard Brexit. It kicks in about 790. It lasts for about 2 years. No ships are allowed to trade across the channel either way. So there's no trade. And it's solved in 793. Now, both of them seem to be arguing about what standard of weight Moses was using in the book of Leviticus. And Charlemagne decides he was using what we would call Attic weight, which is 16 Roman ounces. And Offa disagrees, and he uses Troy weight. It's a 12-ounce version of Troy weight, but it's our Troy weight. And that actually, as we've said, is probably more than 2,000 years old. So if we look back now, Offa was right. The standard kicking around in Moses' time wasn't Attic. That probably comes around about 600 BC. It was probably Troy, which was before Moses. So they have two different pennies. We know this very exactly. And from then on, the British standard is Troy, but we're not calling it Troy yet. It's just our weight, and it's the weight that Offa's got. He actually gets his advice from Babylon, but they've got it below that from the Mesopotamians, from the Persians. So we kick forward then, and the next big change is it happens where we are now. It happens under Edward III. The big problem is Edward III has a very successful war with France, but he takes in huge loans from Italian banks to pay for it. And he goes bankrupt, and essentially the Florentine merchants have got contracts, and they're coming in and taking control of all English revenues. All the monasteries are now signed up to provide wool to merchants to pay off Edward's debts. And on the back of this, they also ship nearly all the silver coin out of England, about maybe more than 50% of it, which is what ordinary people use in markets. And they replace it with gold florins and also French écus, but big gold coins. So you can think of a sterling penny, it's 1.46 grams, but to them it'd be like at least a £20 note. And what they're doing is they're abolishing what would be a £20 note and bringing an 80 pence gold coin. So 80 times 20, what's that? 800,
1600.
£1,600 note. So we've moved on to only using, well, primarily using £1,600 notes. So obviously trade becomes extremely difficult. But one part of this is the merchants in England themselves refuse to continue to use the Florentine standard. So that doesn't get pushed onto us. By 1351, we've gone back to a Troy standard, and the gold coin weighs exactly a quarter of a Troy ounce. And that essentially gets us to the end of that story. We only get back onto silver under Elizabeth with the Spanish silver. So
Fascinating.
yeah.
So you say that Troy weight came to Britain, you think around 1200 BC?
That's what I think, yeah.
Okay,
we
well,
can't prove it's speculative.
It's very interesting because that correlates more or less with the official dating of Brutus coming to Britain.
Sure.
So could that have been how it ended up here?
This is certainly, and I should have said this is when we go back to using troy for the gold coins, 1351. Shortly after that, we get the first mention of troy weight, as Paul has just reminded me. We'd not called it troy weight before then. We'd just called it trade. We just called it weights because all England used that idea of weight. But now we've got two weights. We've got the Florentine one, which becomes avoirdupois, du poids, and we've got the original one, and we start to call it troy. And we do start to call it troy because by 1350, we think it's been brought from Troy to England by Brutus. Okay.
Yeah.
So the word only kicks in. People probably thought we got it from Brutus before then, but we don't explicitly call it troy weight until then. And so we've actually moved forward from Offa, who's looking for the weight of Moses, to 1350, the medieval period, calling it troy weight, the one that Brutus brought us. Okay.
Yeah.
And thanks for reminding me, Paul, because I was losing the track there. And I think from there, I want to go on now to
cut this bit. Yep.
Yeah, I want to go on to what you might call the scientific or modern view of all this.
Okay.
And that starts with John Greaves, who famously went to Egypt in, I think, 1639. He went in part to measure the pyramids, and that's quite famous. But he took a very accurate scale, a scale that weighed almost 1,000th of a gram, well, a 50th of a grain, so 1,000th of a gram. And he weighed coins and weights in Rome, in Istanbul, and then in Cairo. And when he got to Cairo, he discovered the Egyptians were using a weight standard almost the same as England, but not really the same as anybody else. So Greaves discovers that England is using an Egyptian weight standard, but the way he sees it, he thinks the Saxons had preserved the weight standard of Noah. So he thinks this goes back to the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And he's kind of on the right track. But he thinks the Saxons preserved the weight standard of Noah. The rest of Europe had forgotten it, but we remembered it through the Saxons. And he also thinks the Egyptians have kept the weight standard of Noah despite the Muslims. And that's why we are both using the weight standard of Noah. So that's what, and he's got very exact measurements to show they're the same. And then that's his storyline. Now, if we shunt forward about 80 years to, we've got John Arbuthnot, who's a very famous guy. John, he was physician to Queen Anne. He was physician to Isaac Newton. He invented John Bull. He wrote half of Gulliver's Travels. He was spectacular intellect at the time, but he wrote a book on weight standards. And in it, and I won't say exactly what he said in it, in his book in 1727, John Greaves said, "Our troy weight has appeared to have been borrowed by us from none of our European neighbours, but from Egypt." Now, for the next 250 years, everybody ignored that and ignored his evidence, but they kept nitpicking about supposed mistakes he'd made. Nobody wanted to believe that England's weight standards came from Egypt. Almost immediately after he published it, Fuchs, who was in the Royal Society, said English weight standards came from France. And that's what they either believed it came from Rome or from France. And nobody was looking at the actual evidence. Everybody was ignoring the arguments. And there was loads of nitpicking. By 1826, a bloke called Robert Hussey wrote a book, not only attacking Arbuthnot, but really telling lies about what he'd said. And so that rumbled on. You've got people like me in the background. There's a Spaniard, Quepo. There's
an American, Del Mar. They're saying what I'm saying now, but they're all outsiders. And the orthodox view is that it came from France or Rome or whatever. So that ticked forward to 1967. And there was a guy, he's actually following in the footsteps of Petrie, and he's probably repeating Petrie's thoughts. But he publishes it in 1967 at the Science Museum, and he looks at coin weight, and he shows not only was troy weight the same as Egyptian weight, English troy weight the same as Egyptian troy weight, the English penny, which is tied to it, it's 30 grains instead of 32, it's exactly half the dirham. The dirham was 60 grains, the penny is 30 grains. The troy penny is 32 grains, the bullion dirham is 64 grains. So Skinner puts it beyond doubt that we have got our weight standards really from early Islam, and they've got it from the Sasanians, who've got it from the Parthians, who've got it from Darius, who've got it right back to Shulgi in before 2000 BC. So he puts that really beyond doubt in 1967.
Yeah.
He's almost immediately ignored. The next guy at the Science Museum suppresses the book. Now, I spoke to an old German professor who died 2 years ago. He visited the museum around about 1980, and the curator there said he couldn't have a copy of Skinner because they'd put it in the poison cabinet.
Oh dear.
Right? And so Skinner was buried again. So Arbuthnot was buried, 1727. Skinner was buried. And I actually found Arbuthnot's book in the Cathedral Library in York. And I read Skinner there. So around about 2000, I found out that both these two guys were right. And I started redoing it all.
Right, okay.
Standing on their shoulders.
Yes.
Because yeah. And I'm just wondering what else to say. There's only to say what happened to me then. I published that book and I've taken it further. The online version of that chapter is now up to 1922. But when I tried to publish this officially, it was the numismatic, it was BNJ, British Numismatic Journal. I did not feel the referees had been honest, and I asked for an inquiry into what had been written, and it was immediately dismissed, and I resigned 35 years of membership to that. So I'm now out here on my own, still trying to defend the truth as I see it.
Brilliant stuff.
Okay.
Brilliant stuff. Okay. So Rob, going back to your book, Early World Coins and Early Weight Standards, you explain the difference between money and coin. Can you give an account for our viewers, please?
Right. As I said, we didn't have any coin before 600 BC. Now, Aristotle invented a very famous argument about what he thought had happened. And he thought what happened before coins was barter. He thought everybody ran around trying to swap chickens for shoes.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of deception. Mostly what happened before 600 BC is the pharaoh took nearly all the crop and gave it to his chums.
Yeah.
And they had like Mardi Gras days, festival days, and it would be like a car boot, and you could turn out and swap stuff, but it'd be more like a fun fair, a side issue, than how the economy worked. So they did do a bit of trading, but only with what they were left over with, because so much of it would be taken. I mean, it goes down to tithes, still taking a tenth in recent times, but it was much more. I mean, it was more than half the crop. So money before 600 BC is mostly for big merchants, and it's very complicated. They would have an exchange rate for a sack of corn against a big lump of copper and a lump of silver, and they knew in their heads what it was all interchanged.
Yeah.
And they might well express it in corn weight, or they might express it in silver weight or copper weight, depending. But it was mostly written down or in the heads. So money was, I mean, if you want me to be technical, it's a mapping from goods and services into the real number line. You just take the objects and map them onto numbers.
Right.
That's what money is, and what it still is.
Yeah.
But with coins, instantiating the number line, pennies, pounds, it's a line.
Yeah.
You can get hold of it and finish it. You know, it's so much more efficient way of trading between individuals.
Yes.
And so the problem was, these people who are against coins don't want individuals to trade.
Yes.
They want to just
yes.
organise as themselves.
Oh yes.
Okay, enough
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Interesting times we're living in now. Okay, so just one final question on coins. When did coin first appear in Britain, do you think? What was the first British coin?
Right, we know this, and it's amazing nobody's commented on this. The first coins are attributed to the Belgae, and I think they are in Belgium or that area.
They came from Belgium, yeah.
Yeah. So they're Belgae, they're big gold things. They vaguely copy, I think it's Philip's status. So they've got a head on one side and a horse on the other, but it's very stylized. I've been told not to say it's Celtic, but that's what coin people say.
Not on this channel, yes, okay.
But anyway, we were importing the first coins around about 200 BC from the Belgae, and what everybody agrees is they weigh 7.8 grams when they're struck. Nobody tells you that's exactly a quarter of a troy ounce. I've spoken to both the biggest coin dealer and the biggest expert in Britain and said, do you think it might be interesting?
Yeah.
They both said no.
Wow. Why?
Because only crackpots talk about coin weight.
Yes.
We've been dismissed. We're all crackpots. They will say it weighs 7.8 grams. A troy ounce is 31.1 grams. So it's almost bang on a quarter.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's finish up with this question for you, Robert. In your coin book, you mentioned synchronicities. 3 regions of the world came up with coins at about the same time, and 1,000 years later, there was a synchronized global dark age of coinlessness. What do you make of those synchronicities?
Well, we don't really know who invented coins. There's a general consensus it's between 650 and 600 BC in Lydia. People are always arguing. But the Chinese have just found a factory from before 500 BC. So whatever it was, the idea spread like wildfire. And we don't know yet whether the Chinese had it first or the Turks. But it spread like wildfire from Turkey into Greece. It took maybe 200 years to spread. It jumped over Persia. Egypt didn't accept coins. They'd still got a pharaoh. Persia didn't. They struck it for their Western colonies, but not for Iran.
Okay.
But it did jump through into Afghanistan and into India. And that's, I think, about 450 BC, so fairly soon. But other people, the Indians, want them to be first, of course.
Yeah.
So it's all a bit speculative.
Yes.
But what happens, I'll explain. Really, it's easiest to talk about the synchronicity just to look at Rome. So it's a good model for everything. When Rome's a village, they're using lumps of copper by weight for money.
Right.
And then they start making weights of copper, and they had a pound coin that weighed a pound in copper. It very rapidly inflates down. But they use copper as their coinage down to 200 BC. And then they switch to silver and copper, and they run silver and copper side by side. but increasingly silver, down to 130 BC. And in 130 BC, you get the Republican political order comes under stress with the Gracchi. There starts to be street fighting and a mess, basically. And at that time, they almost completely stopped producing copper. So they've now moved from copper for everybody to they're moving towards copper for nobody. There's still the old coins going around, but they're harder to get, and you can hoard them up and take them out of the market.
Yes.
So you've only got silver right through the Civil War, and that's the positive side of Julius Caesar and Augustus. They both reintroduced copper, so they're bringing coins for ordinary people again. And that then runs down to just after 200 AD, and the pay for soldiers is getting out of hand after 200 AD. The emperor has to use all his resources, or increasingly his resources, to pay soldiers. So he starts to debase the denarius, the silver denarius. And over the 3rd century, after 200 AD, it drops from good silver down to copper. It becomes a copper coin. And if you talk to a guy in Roman coins, he'll go on and on and on about that inflation, where you visibly see it go from silver to copper. But if you do the sums, that inflation is not much worse than the one I've experienced. When my first pint of beer was 10 pence.
Wow.
We paid £7 a pint last night.
We did, I know.
And that's what happened in Rome. So it's dreadful, but it's not dreadful but according to our standards. Now, what we're not told is, it's really Constantine pushes the whole empire onto gold.
Right.
And there's a copper coinage, but it's hyperinflationary. They keep changing it. And that, I mean, the inflation from silver to copper is about 100 times. The inflation on the copper once it's fiat is about 7,000 times, right?
Yeah.
So you make a bit of money, tomorrow it's gone.
Yes.
Unless you're in gold. You've got gold, rock solid.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Okay.
And that, in my view, and it's close to what Gibbon said, is why the Roman Empire collapsed. Right? People will say all sorts of things, but well, there's a saying, there's an ancient Chinese saying in it. Ancient Chinese economics books aren't like ours.
Yes.
And it's an economics book called the Guanzi, and it's advice to the emperor. And the advice to the emperor is, men with broken hearts cannot be expected to fight for you. Right? And in my view, 4th century Rome screwed people so hard with inflation.
Yes. Makes complete sense.
Yes. That's what I think happened, and Mary Beard disagrees.
Okay.
And there's a story there that I won't tell.
Brilliant. Okay.
So, if you wanted, I could go on from that for our American viewers, if you have any.
Well, let's do that. Let's finish up with you explaining to us how the Wizard of Oz plays into all this, Robert.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I think it's another version of that story. We are where Rome got to. But the Wizard of Oz, okay, as people disagree about this, of course, so this is my story, but it's certainly not just my story. A lot of people agree with me. Starts with the 1896 election in America, and there's a new party formed to challenge the two main parties. The two main parties are still, as they were then, Republicans and Democrats. There's a third party coming through the middle called the People's Party, and if I understand it correctly, these get called populists.
Yes.
And I suspect that's where we get the word populist on the BBC today. It's from that election. Now, the man who came to the front of the People's Party was called William Jennings Bryan. And he went round giving speeches, attacking really Rockefeller. And he gave a big speech about how the working man was being crucified on a cross of gold. So the American system had evolved, like the late Roman system, to be based on gold, a very narrow system. William Jennings Bryan said, well, 4 men could buy all the gold and keep it from themselves, and he thought that's what they were doing. So he doesn't think there's enough money, but he thinks the solution is to go back, which in America was only about 30 years, to go back to using silver and gold side by side. But since there's so much more silver than gold, it would effectively have put them back onto a silver standard. Now, the really strange thing about this, sort of weird thing about this, is they wanted to put silver back at 16-1 against gold. And 16 troy ounces is 500 grams. So it would put them back onto the troy weight pound from Mesopotamia from 4,000 years earlier. I don't know if they knew that, but it would have done that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Boehm, that's how I pronounce him, I don't know if that's correct, wrote a book called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, I think. I remember. Or did he write The Wizard of Oz? And
he wrote several, but I think the original was The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Wonderful Wizard of Oz, probably.
Wow.
But I think this is a cartoon version of what he thought had gone on 4 years earlier.
Right.
Okay. And in it, the heroine is Dorothy.
Yes.
And in the book, she's wearing silver shoes. Right.
Is she ruby shoes?
No.
Oh, sorry. Carry on.
That's what Hollywood did. When they brought the film out in the 30s,
right,
they put her in ruby shoes.
Okay, but it's silver shoes in the book.
It's silver shoes in the book.
I should remember that. I read it. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Long time ago.
It was. That does look an awful lot like a conspiracy to hide what he was talking about.
Yes.
Okay, but she's definitely wearing silver shoes in the book, and they're on the yellow brick road, which is the gold standard.
Yeah.
And they're going to the Emerald City, which looks a lot like the greenback. So they're moving from gold onto Fayat, and they're all being directed by this chap behind a curtain, who they're told is a wizard, but in fact is just as confused as everyone else.
Yeah.
So The Wizard of Oz is kind of a story of what happened in ancient Rome as well as what happened in America. And if you go onto Wikipedia, you'll find this nearly all suppressed and scoffed at.
Yes.
But I mean, he actually, when he writes the play, he's actually talking about Rockefeller.
Yeah.
In fact, there's an academic who's nearly forgotten in Britain, P.N. Ure. He wrote a book on the first coinage in 1922. And he says, he's not quite right, but he's on the right track. He said there were 2 political parties in ancient Athens.
Yeah.
The men of the hills, sorry, the men of the fields, I think it is, who are the big landowners. The men of the sea, who are the big trading merchants. So those are 2 parties. And the third party, the men of the hills. Men of the hills have got the silver mines. And Pisistratus gets his funding from the men of the hills and tries to overturn, in fact, successfully brings them to a democracy in some steps. He wasn't the Democrat, he was on the way, in a way. This is Ure's view. But the joke is, he writes all this about ancient Greece, and then all his footnotes are about Standard Oil.
Brilliant.
So I'm not alone in saying these things.
Yes, yeah.
But I hope that brings it into a modern context.
It does. You know? I think it does brilliantly. Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay, Robert. Well, it's been an absolute. It's been brilliant to meet you. Had a really good time last night at the Alsit Hall, having a nice pint of beer. I think your work is absolutely fantastic. It's so important. So I'll be doing whatever I can in the future to promote it. Are you? Is this book still available at all for people?
No.
It's
But I've got the YouTube channel which you mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't think it's too technical, but I am looking for people who are going to work the numbers,
Okay.
see what I'm really doing. But the whole of the last chapter has been updated twice now. So that's all online. I've got an academia page. If you put Robert Tye, you'll find my academia page and you'll find that chapter
Right. Okay.
from the book, and it's free.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay. Cheers, Robert. Thanks for your time.
It's been great.
Yeah.
It's been excellent. Paul.
Yeah. Really enjoyed
Excellent.
it. Cheers. Thank you. Right.
So
there we
what
are.
do you think?